Good evening and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Boy, we got a show for you tonight. There is an absolute bunch of lunacy that has gone on, and we'll be hearing from various protagonists and various people who have got common sense. We do have a long show tonight, so do be aware, because there is a lot that has gone on in the last 24 to 48 hours. And of course, we need to get tucked into all of the things that are going on. There is no doubt whatsoever now that there is new legislation being passed. We do not have Paul Brooker with us tonight, by the way, just to let you know, but we shall do our very best to bring you everything that is good and true. Now, the great Ukraine robbery, not with Paul Brooker, I'm afraid, but they have had a meeting, and of course they had some meetings afterwards as well. But the Europeans are not having a bar of Trump's peace proposal. And of course, they have let it be known by the fact that they are pushing through emergency legislation within the next week to give Ukraine a loan of $140 billion from the Russian assets. Now, we're going to be hearing some very different views on this. And of course, there are many people in many different walks of life who are saying all sorts of different things. Many of them, from Richard Tice to the World Bank to Christine Lagarde, you name it, and they're all out there having their say. And of course, this is just going to cause more and more, shall we say, grief for the people who are there. So the deal, as they say, Richard Tice has been invited to come on the show from Reform, the MP, because he tweeted this, of all things. Here we go. This is his tweet. Deal to unlock literally the frozen Russian assets within days. I've been calling for this for months. Europeans must use this negotiating leverage. Leverage would that be? The Russians have already written this money off. Let me be absolutely clear here. The Russians would be ecstatic if you steal that money, because it will wreck not only Euroclear, and it will wreck Belgium. And George in the comments has said using those assets is illegal, and it is. He is absolutely right. Now, we've been emailing a few people today, to people in the city, and we have a full rundown of everything that is going on. We've asked Richard Tice to come on the show and explain his comments. Don't hold your breath, is what I would say on that one. Belgium is pushing back against the plan to use the frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine's economy and war effort. Well, why is this? Well, the European Union unveiled their plan to use billions of euros in frozen Russian assets to help cover Ukraine's war needs over the next 2 years. First thing to tell you is it won't last 2 years, it won't last 6 months, because involved in that is the 50 billion loan that the European Union gave to Ukraine. So straight away, if they do get hold of that money, or they do get that money, they're going to drag it into their sphere. Now, we've got the full bang-on, shall we say, argument about this. And the Belgians, of course, are pushing back, saying that the plan carries legal and financial risks that it fears could end up shouldering a loan, which is exactly what will happen. The European Union will walk away and say, well, we didn't green light it, you did, we just asked for it. Now, the European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, said that Brussels would supply 90 billion euros, 105 billion of Ukraine's budget requirements for 2026-27, estimated by the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, to be 137 billion euros. Not quite what they said it was. That's 159 billion, okay, dollars. She said that the other international partners will cover the rest. And she was actually speaking, and she said, we are sending a strong message to the Ukrainian people. We are in for the long haul. Now, the frozen Russian funds held in Europe will be used as collateral for a reparations loan designed to sustain Ukraine's war effort. Sure, the Russians aren't going to agree to that, and which Ukraine would ultimately pay back after it obtains compensation from Russia for the war. That's never going to happen. So let's be absolutely clear here. This money is never going to be paid back unless on one particular way, and that is through you. The people of Germany, the people of the UK, the people of Europe will be paying this money back. They will not get this money from Russia. And in fact, many people and many companies that have frozen Russian assets in Russia will lose them, and that will cause all sorts of problems elsewhere. Now, aid could be funded through common EU borrowing. That could be done. But despite Belgium's objections, most European officials have expressed a preference for using the frozen Russian assets. And the reason they've done that, of course, is because Europe is stony broke. The EU's controversial plan comes as the latest round of United-led peace talks between Russia and Ukraine shows little signs of progress. And that's mainly down to the State Department briefing against Donald Trump, his own Congress giving him a very hard time, and of course, shall we say, everybody in the EU, every man and his dog, turning around and saying they're going to scupper, or not saying they're going to scupper the peace deal, but doing their very best to do it. It seems like the only sane people around might be Donald Trump, Witkoff, and of course, Kushner. Now, Moscow has denounced the reparations loan plan as pure theft. Now, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the European bloc has committed 197 billion euros to Ukraine, mainly in the form of military and so-called humanitarian support. The European Commission is now pledging to provide more money for another 2 years in the form of loans. Now, on Wednesday, long-awaited details of the EU plan for a reparations loan were published. Under it, some 104 billion of frozen Russian assets will be used as a collateral for the loan to Ukraine. Now, that is not coming from Euroclear. Let me be absolutely clear here. What they're trying to do is push through legislation, not only to use the money that they've already, how can I put it, froze it, pinched it, spent it, and get some of that money back, but also they want to grab the money from Euroclear as well. Now, under a loan arrangement, this is how it works. Repayment to creditors, and we have this from our sources in the banking sector. Both government and private lenders will be guaranteed by the present and future earnings of the frozen assets. Ukraine would then pay that loan once Moscow compensates Kiev for the destruction that they care. Now, our friend has turned around and said that the people at Chatham House, which of course is an England think tank, an English think tank, it's quite a clever tactic. It's Gregorio Ruse who's behind this. Now, he's the director of Europe and Russia Eurasia programs at Chatham House in the UK. They're not seizing the assets rather than keeping them and freezing them and monetizing them. Still sealing. He said there is no precedent for this. Well, there is. Von der Leyen said the funds would provide Ukraine with more leverage in peace talks and demonstrate to Moscow that the prolongation, get that word out, of the war on their side comes with a high cost for them. She added that Washington had been briefed on the plan. Washington said no to the plan. If von der Leyen's reparations loan plan fails to win unanimous EU member state support, and it must be unanimous, and you're not going to get that because Serbia and Hungary are going to vote against it, she hinted the EU could fall back on market borrowing. However, this again would require unanimous agreement from the bloc, giving Hungary and Serbia a chance to literally veto it again. Now, Hungary has repeatedly vetoed EU assistance to Ukraine because Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government argues that arming Kiev will prolong the war, and it will, and increase the EU's collective debt. It will. Orban has maintained that unusually warm ties. I wouldn't say that. They get on fine with Vladimir Putin compared to other EU leaders. That is fair. Now, Belgium's worried that Euroclear, which is the Brussels-based financial clearinghouse that holds the bulk of the frozen Russian assets, could end up in damaging litigation if Russia challenges the EU decision, which it will, and has already indicated that it will. And legally, the European law is certain, absolutely certain, that this is breaking the law and is illegal. Let me say that again. The law under European Commission and the European Union laws that they currently have are literally illegal. So this is why they're trying to draft emergency legislation. So in theory, Russia can challenge the asset freeze decision in a court in Belgium, where Euroclear itself is incorporated. Now, literally, the Belgian foreign minister, Maxime Prevot, said, "We're not seeking to antagonize our partners or Ukraine, but we're simply seeking to avoid potential disastrous consequences for a member state that's being asked to show solidarity without being offered the same solidarity in return." Now, there's where they have a point, because Euroclear have said the rest of the EU have got to sign an agreement to say that they will share the money or the repayment back to Euroclear should anything go wrong, and cover Euroclear's losses when a lack of confidence in Euroclear means that other partners will withdraw their money. The Saudi Arabians have already said they will do. And Euroclear earns one heck of a lot of money, much more than the money that is on there on the table at the moment. Instead, they want the EU to pursue ordinary market borrowing to fund a loan to Ukraine. It's a well-known sort of tactic, and he is strongly supported by Belgian officials who have doubled down on their opposition to the reparation loan in recent weeks, because they will get this from Euroclear. Euroclear will sign off on it. Then they will turn around and literally they will never get that money back. Everybody will leave Euroclear. Euroclear will collapse. That will send the Belgian government into a tailspin. They'll be booted out of office, and the European Union will turn around and go, "Well, we asked you for the money, but you're the ones who signed it." So you cannot trust them in any way, shape, or form. They were asking for written guarantees. The European Union are not going to give them. So that tells you something about the state of the European Union's finances. Now, to address Belgium's concerns, the European Commission's blueprint does include measures to shield EU governments from possible retaliation from Russia. I'd like to know how they're going to do that, and to establish an EU-level borrowing mechanism, and this is what we had from our guy in the city, to underpin the loan to Ukraine. However, the reparations loan scheme entails consequential economic and financial and legal risks, and the Commission's safeguards do not go far enough, leaving Belgium exposed. It's not acceptable to use the money and leave them alone facing the risk. Now, how much money is at stake? Well, you've got some 290 billion euros. That is the figure we have been told by our guys in the city. So we know it's right, which is around about $337 billion of Russian sovereign wealth. The rest, the other 300 billion, is held in gold reserves by the Russians. Now, principally in the form of foreign exchange reserves held as cash and bonds. They were frozen by Western powers following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago. A large portion of those assets is held in Belgium, roughly 194 billion euros. Euroclear holds about 183 billion euros of these assets. Smaller amounts of these assets are also held in the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, France, and Germany. France have actually refused to say where those frozen assets are. Now, under a plan agreed by the G7 countries in 2024, Ukraine will be provided with loans to be repaid using the interest earned on Russia's frozen assets, effectively leaving those assets untouched. Yesterday's announcement goes one step further by collateralizing the frozen fund. So von der Leyen said, "We have listened very carefully to Belgium's concerns. We've taken almost all of them into account, almost all of them. We will share the burden in a fair way as it is a European way." but they won't give them any written guarantees. Other European officials have echoed this. Johann Waderpool, the German's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has said we take Belgium's concerns seriously. They are justified, but the issue can be resolved. It can be resolved if we're prepared to take responsibility together. But the Germans are not. They are one of the ones saying they won't sign. Now, David van Wiel, the Netherlands Minister of Foreign Affairs, highlighted the states of Belgium not doing this. The funds are really, really important. We need to support the Ukraine economy. Otherwise, they'll have a very rough time next year because we cannot fund it ourselves. Now, Van Wiel emphasised the EU member states have listened to Belgium and are willing to make sure they're not alone in this. But Belgium want a signed law and declaration signed by all the countries. Now, Belgium, meanwhile, has been collecting tax revenue from the immobilised Russian funds. Interest from these assets is already being directed into a G7 organised loan package for them. Now, they only earn around about 1.0, and we've got this now from 5 different sources. 1.5 billion to 2.1 billion is the total amount of money that is earned from these frozen assets. So let's just give you a heads up on this. There is no way that the money that has been loaned supposedly from the frozen assets, the interest that has literally gone anywhere whatsoever. So where is it and who's got it? So let's get into this because this has gone. This is starting to make all sorts of people very, very nervous indeed. The very first thing you need to do is realise the amount of military aid. So here's the money that was military aid allocations by donors. There's billions in euros. And as you can see, through 2022, 2023, 2024 and 2025, Europe in blue, other donors in grey, and the United States in orange. And as you can see, ever since the United States have stopped propping them up, Europe have had to go it alone. And from literally, should we say, from March, April, right through, they have had to fund it themselves. Now, the well is dry, okay? It really is. And they've got to, how can I put it? They've been to the well once too often. And of course, there is nothing left. So where are the frozen Russian assets? Let's have a look. Here we go. Here's where the most of them are. Belgium, of course, 193 billion. France, 71 billion. Japan, 58 billion. The Japanese have now said that they only have around 33 billion. And it is nominal now that Germany have the rest of those assets, which we didn't know had been transferred. So United Kingdom, 26 billion. Austria, 17 billion. Switzerland, 8 billion. US, 5 billion. And Germany have about 20 billion. Now, here's where we hit a problem, because the United Kingdom are saying they've only got 8 billion. They have actually, we have this from the horse's mouth, they had 26 billion. Where's the other 18 billion gone? I think you can possibly guess where that has gone. So, of course, they've been dipping into the principal already, and this is a major problem. Italy have been asked to stump up their euros, and Maloney, in a meeting with Zelensky, point blank refused. And we have it on very good authority that a furious exchange of words over around about half an hour discourse, sure that you can turn around and say, look, there is a major, major problem here because Italy are refusing to put any more into the pot. They've literally turned around and said, no more, not happening. We cannot afford it. And this is where we have a major problem, because this money is now literally floating around in shall we say, in the stratosphere. And of course, these crooks are going to steal it. And of course, as we can see from here, there we go. Starmer says that the peace negotiations have reached a critical stage and the PM believes the release of frozen Russian funds is imminent. Now, this meeting between Starmer, Merz and Macron was all about these frozen Russian assets. And we're talking about 104 million. Yes, that is pretty much, we're talking about 104 billion, I should say. And of course, when we tot it up, if we take Germany's 22 billion, if we take the United Kingdom's 26 billion, comes to about 51, and then we take France's 71, comes to about 121 billion. Now, that pretty much covers the interest and, shall we say, the loan. So very simply, we are saying that most of that principal has been dipped into, and the reason they want to get that is so they can have their 50 billion back. They have to this point, as I say, when we just showed you that chart earlier on, that's around 70 billion. With the 50 billion, that makes it about 120 billion that's got to come back. Now, is this highly illegal? It is, and it's going to cause a major, major problem. Now, we are going to play you a little bit of a video. And of course, this is, I very, very seldom see, he's a geopolitical commentator. His name is Alexander Mercurios. And he very seldom do you see this man get as heated as he is about to get. So we'll very, very have a look at this. And hopefully you will get a clearer understanding of just how angry and how, shall we say, the total madness that is behind this, because the nonsense that is behind this is going to bankrupt a good deal of countries. Anybody that thinks that it won't, it will. Let's have a look.
Are prepared to behave like this. They are driven by extreme anger.
Work today is broken. We're all working in too many disconnected apps, and it's killing team productivity.
Is mostly focused on using its emergency powers, preparing legislation to use its emergency powers in order that it can change the basis upon which the Russian assets have been frozen so that they cannot be unfrozen without the unanimous agreement of all of the various EU member states. And since this change would require in itself unanimity, changing the basis upon which sanctions can be lifted, requiring that it be done unanimously, instead of having sanctions rolled over every 6 months, requiring unanimity to keep them rolled over. Well, since this drastic, radical change would almost certainly invite vetoes, not just from Hungary and Slovakia, but from various other EU countries, the European Commission, apparently with the support of the big states, Germany, France, Italy, is moving now towards invoking its emergency powers. And as I understand it, the plan is to impose the liabilities on the member states, the liabilities that they would each incur in the event that the sanctions were lifted and the Ukrainians never repaid any money to the European Union, and the European Union was left on the hook for the 140 billion euro loan, which it is now proposing to make using Russian frozen assets as security. Well, in order to do that, the Europeans also, as I understand it, would need to use their emergency powers. So we see what's happening. Legislation is now being prepared, and it's apparently the intention is to try to get it not just drafted, but enacted, approved in some way, presumably also by majority vote this week, so that the European Union can proceed next week to the first vote at the European Council meeting, the vote to reverse the situation with the sanctions so that the frozen assets can only be released with a unanimous agreement of all EU member states, and then presumably to move to the next stage, which is to allocate, to assign liability according to the breakdown that the European Commission has itself drafted to the member states. So Hungary, which opposes this entire process, which does not believe that the Russian assets should be used as collateral for the 140 billion euro loan that the European Union is about to float, Hungary, which considers this entire process to be illegal, would nonetheless be on the hook for 2 billion euros if this whole set of proposals and ideas, which the Hungarians have repeatedly spoken out against, have repeatedly said that they oppose. Anyway, they would be on the hook for 2 billion euros if all their fears turned out to be correct and the Ukrainians refused to pay back or were unable to pay back. The Russian assets had to be repaid to Russia, and this entire scheme collapsed. And the same presumably applies to Slovakia and to all sorts of other countries. What is being proposed here is a kind of forced loan. Countries like Hungary, Slovakia, who knows, probably many others that don't want to put themselves forward as backing this scheme and certainly don't want to provide guarantees for it. They are, in effect, being forced to do so through these extremely dubious legal mechanisms in order that Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas and Friedrich Merz and presumably Emmanuel Macron of France can go ahead and give Zelensky, a man who is drowning in a corruption scandal in his own country and who is, as the President of the United States has now just said, losing the war he is fighting. Anyway, to provide Zelensky with another 140 billion euros. Now, to repeat again, all of this is almost certainly illegal. So illegal that a European official has told the Financial Times that he considers this crazy. There's been several people who have suggested already, apparently in private discussions with the Financial Times, that they consider this scheme to be contrary to European Union law and who doubt that the European Court of Justice will uphold it if it is ever challenged there. They point out that the emergency that the European Commission is invoking as needed, which supposedly needs these emergency decisions to address, that emergency not only does not exist now, but insofar as it would ever exist, it would be entirely because the European Union had moved forward with the scheme to misappropriate the Russian assets, to float this 140 billion euro loan. In other words, it would be an emergency that the European Union, the European Commission, had itself intentionally created. Now, this is completely circular logic. It is, in fact, crazy logic in legal terms. If I was to say with certainty that the European Court of Justice would reject it, however, I would be saying a great deal more than I know, or indeed believe. Logically, properly, it ought to reject it, but anybody who's followed the decisions of the European Court of Justice must prepare themselves for the very real possibility that they will find some type of tortious reasoning in order to justify it when the eventual legal challenge from Hungary, Slovakia, and who knows which other countries ultimately comes. So there it is, the European Union rushing to seize these assets, because when you use assets as collateral, that is in effect what you're doing. You're seizing them, even if the assets themselves remain intact. And the European Union rushing to do that, and basically acting contrary to European Union law in order to achieve it. And as to the last point, let me repeat again, that is not just my view. It is the view of European officials who have discussed this with the Financial Times, and which the Financial Times itself has reported about. As I've said already, there is an obsessive quality to this thing. There is a kind of crazed quality to this, something that defies rational analysis and explanation. When people are prepared to behave like this, they are driven by extreme anger and fear and by all sorts of other emotions. And any attempt to try to discuss this logically, to take apart the various legal reasons, to look for questions of calculated self-interest behind all of this. Well, when you're dealing with this, actions like this, well, I would say that it's pointless, as I discussed in a previous programme.
So there we are. There's Alexander Mercurios there, who very seldom comes out with that sort of language, turning around and saying just how bad this is. Now, let me give you an idea here. This would put everybody in hock for roughly around 30 years, almost every single one of those countries. Nilis.
Well, as Julian Assange said, he came out with what's happening in the world is just a massive money laundering operation, and
yes.
we see that power's gone from the Zionist banking system to the ownership. They want the ownership of everything, and this is one of the mechanisms they're going to get it, because people like BlackRock are going to scoop everything up, aren't they? When
yes.
Europe goes into debt, yes. And we're going to get to that stage where if you don't have that mark of the beast, you won't be able to buy or sell anything, because you're not going to you won't be beholden to BlackRock. If you're not going to be beholden to BlackRock, you won't be able to buy or sell, or similar Zionist corporations. You won't be able to buy or sell anything.
No, exactly that. And this is the thing that's sort of making this unbelievably crazy. And of course, we are well behind this. Andy Edge.
How much has Russia got in regards of European country assets?
Of other countries, European countries, well over 512 billion.
Seems like a good swap.
Doesn't it? And of course they will of course then sell that off. They're frozen as well, so they can't get hold of them. But it seems an absolutely crazy thing to do. Nilis.
Yeah, I don't think it's anger or fear. I think there's a darker agenda behind these people who put people like Ursula von der Leyen and Callis in power, because Trump's gone along with it to a certain extent in Gaza and stuff like that, but he's not going to go. He's not going to destroy he doesn't want to destroy the American or European economies because of it. I don't think.
I think you're right. Lee Williams.
Just a quick one. I mean, I don't know if I heard this right. Was it 200 billion that was given to a bloke called Tony Blair? Would he help the UK at all?
Tony Blair's persona non grata at the moment in Gaza. He's just been removed as the head of that. Nilis, very quickly.
Right. Well, there are the two richest institutions here in Europe, I think, are the Norwegian Wealth Fund, which has come out of Norway's oil revenue.
Yes.
And another is the royal family. They have very large secret wealth, which is not disclosed. They have large shareholdings in both the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England.
And the coastline. They're not going to be handing that over to anybody. Nobody's going to touch that, because it's literally. If that comes out, there's going to be all sorts going on.
You wouldn't be
very quickly.
you wouldn't be surprised if they will benefit because the amount of hugging that Charles does with Zelensky is onto something probably.
Well, let's wait and see on that one. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on that one. The Russian tanker, Louis Bastos, you wanted to say something.
I don't think it will go through because we got at least 4 or 5 countries in Europe will not accept it.
Yes, which means they've got to go back to Euroclear. So round and round we go. You know, quite staggering. Let's have a little look at this. This is in the Black Sea. This has happened today. This is an Indian tanker carrying Russian oil. So not only have the Ukrainians hit another oil tanker in the Black Sea, that makes the 4th one that they've hit. And of course, this has caused a problem. They've also been stupid enough to release a video claiming the responsibility for it, rather like the IRA used to do for bombing back in the day. Now, there's going to be massive repercussions for this because a new civilian vessel has been attacked. It is the unmanned boats hit the tanker Dashan under the flag of Gambia. The vessel is also is under sanctions as part of the so-called Russian Shadow Fleet. A group of unmanned boats set out from the Odessa region last night and headed towards the eastern part of the Black Sea after a British flight 24 hours before. And of course, bypassed the Crimean Peninsula. The extent of the damage is still unclear, but there's one very characteristic detail. During the attack on the tanker, a British reconnaissance aircraft, RC-135W, was operating in the airspace over that region. Immediately after the attack, the aircraft headed to the area where the tanker is located and then patrolled to Sudak on the southern coast of Crimea. This is already the 4th civilian vessel to be attacked by the enemy in the last 2 weeks, as the Russians have said. And this incident, again, as far as we're concerned, shows that Ukrainian forces, supported by the West, do not intend to curb their attacks on our shipping. Sean Murphy.
Well, Warren, I think the fortunate thing is, although it's very naughty of the Ukrainians, the fortunate thing is they've hit what appears to be an empty tanker.
Yeah.
If you look at the depth of the hole above the waterline,
yes.
If that was fully loaded, it would be much lower in the water. So it looks like it was an empty tanker.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, as I say, this is the first one that's happened. Let's have a look at this. Here we go. Here's where the other tankers, of course, were attacked. And of course, we've got the 135W rivet joint British reconnaissance. And of course, they were doing this all the time when the bombing, most of the bombing was going on in Gaza. They were doing the flights over. But once again, this has gone from Odessa. So this is telling everybody that it really is that deliberate. Could have been trying to do this. But as people are saying in the comments, this is just mass panic now. And we do not know what the stupidity of the European Union and Britain is going to do. Now, everybody will turn around and go, oh, that can't be right. It can't be right. It absolutely is. Britain were behind this. And of course, this has happened, shall we say, at just about the wrong time when they're trying to get, shall we say, everything sorted out. Louis Bastos.
That's piracy. That's piracy.
Yes. Yeah, exactly what it is. You know, you're attacking commercial shipping, whether you like it or not, doesn't matter. But you can't go around doing that. Let's have a look at this, because this is Lavrov talking about those frozen Russian assets.
Said that we would never think of going to war with Europe but if there are European military contingents in Europe or hardware, we will respond. And we are ready to respond already. Russian diplomacy understands what's at stake and seeks to support the president's effort in terms of ensuring our external security, as well as defending our compatriots, which includes the right to religion and the Russian language.
There we go. So that is Lavrov turning around and saying that he will and that Russia will respond. And of course, we're going to get more and more of that. Now, when we're talking about Nilis?
This going back to this tanker, I was going to say, hitting an Indian ship is going to annoy India. I presume that tanker was insured by a Chinese insurance company because they've taken up a lot of the slack. Because Lloyd's, it's forbidden for Lloyd's to insure any of the shadow fleet. It's illegal for them to do that. They've lost a lot of business, and it's going to annoy
the Russian shadow fleet.
Yeah. If this carries on, Russia's got no choice but to take the whole of the coastline, haven't they?
No, none at all. They're literally going to have to do that, and there's where we have a problem, and we do have a problem now because this is not going to stop. It's not going to stop at all. And of course, everybody's saying, "Oh, give us the money, give us the money." Japan, by the way, have refused to hand over the 30 billion in Russian assets that they hold on to. So, should we say that's making everybody a bit annoyed, to say the very least, when Japan turned around and put their foot down and said, "No, we're not doing that because we're then on the hook for that money to the Russians, and we've got enough problems as it is." With China. So what we've got at the moment is an impasse where, of course, this is going to go round and round and round. And they're saying that they're going to have that money. But unless they're dipping into their own principle, they can't supply that money to Ukraine. There is something else. I mean, when we are talking about, let's face it here, the most corrupt regime you could possibly imagine. Okay. We're going to go into a little bit of that because there's some bits and pieces that have happened that you need to know and you need to see. There are, shall we say, some horrible things going on to do with the armed forces in Minorad. If you've seen, shall we say, what we've been showing you over the last couple of days, you will have seen that there is the pocket in Minorad is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. They left them there to die. Okay, and there is still about 900 there. So far, they have found in the whole of the area with Pokrovsk and Minorad, they are saying there is around 24,000 dead. Okay, dead Ukrainian soldiers, many injured, but mostly dead. And of course, they've left them there, and that pocket is growing smaller and smaller and smaller. And we're going to come on to another disaster as well in a second. But just clearing up Minorad for you. People have been posting, especially the BBC and others, saying that Pokrovsk and Minorad is not under Russian control. Well, this is soldiers in Minorad today, okay, surrendering. Ukrainian soldiers are surrendering en masse so that they don't get slaughtered. And they are complaining that they've been left to their own devices, very little water, no food, very little ammunition, and of course they are dying in great numbers, and of course they're getting worse and worse and worse, and of course they don't want to die. So the poor so-and-sos. We're going to give you a little call here because Ukraine come out and talked about Human Rights Day today. Okay, have a little look at this. This is a little compilation of Ukraine and their Human Rights Day.
Today, Ukraine, along with the rest of the world, celebrates Human Rights Day. Despite everything, Ukraine is developing and thriving today. Here, like nowhere else in Europe, you can walk down the street without fear of being shot or killed. This is a country where democracy flourishes, and relations between people have reached a new level. This is Free Ukraine, a truly European country. Come visit. It's exciting and fun.
That is happening every day. People are getting beaten up and thrown into vans and everything else. Now, I'm going to play you a video now, which I am going to, in fact, I'm going to wait until the end of the first hour because it does involve something really, really awful. But I want to play you a video which will show you just how far these idiots go. Now, you would have heard about Bucha, which, of course, was the so-called massacre that the Russians carried out. Well, Sergei Lavrov had something to say about that today as well.
Proverbial case of Bucha, you know how it happened, and as a gesture of goodwill, President remembered this recently, to push forward agreements that had been proposed by the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians were banned by Boris Johnson from continuing the negotiations in 2022. And when there was still hope that an agreement could be achieved, as a gesture of goodwill, we pulled our troops from the suburbs of Kiev in Bucha. For 2 days, the mayor of the city was talking on TV that they are back in their homes again. And then 3 days later, BBC reporters were there on the central streets, the center of Bucha. They filmed dead bodies that obviously had been lying there for 3 days, really, and nobody had seen them but the BBC. And then there was the new wave of sanctions, accusations of atrocities, and ever since, for 4 years, we've been trying to find the truth. I said several times that in the UN Security Council, looking Secretary General Guterres in the eyes, I asked him to at least give me the list of people whose bodies were found by the BBC film crew there, who miraculously found themselves there on that day. We wrote official letters to the European Commissioner on Human Rights, and there's an establishment there especially created for Ukraine, but we didn't get any answer.
So let's be clear here, the massacre of Bucha, we've had literally reports, and we've turned around and said, look, here's a French merc who was there, who said the Azov battalion were going around killing people in Bucha because they refused to fight. They didn't kill any Russians while the Russians were occupying the place. 3 days later, 3 or 4 days later, suddenly these bodies start appearing. Now, the Russians have asked consistently over and over again for one name, just one name of anybody that has been massacred, that was massacred in the town of Bucha. And all this time, the Ukrainians have not provided that evidence. Now, the French turned up and started removing the bodies once they'd been buried, exhuming the bodies and taking them away in bags. Now, you have to wonder, do you not, why that was happening? And of course, we have still to get any answers whatsoever on Bucha, but we have got the ICJ accepting a Russian case of genocide against Ukraine. I'll say that one more time. A Russian case of genocide against Ukraine. Let's have a look. This is the ICJ doing this, and it is for 166 war crimes and a further 172 instances of death, obviously causing death through related causes. So the ICJ are now actually looking at this, which means to do this, they have to have accepted the principle that this actually happened. Okay? It's not one of those It actually happened. Now, let's get into this. Now, we showed you the other day, didn't we? We showed you Sky turning around and saying they did a walk around in a bunker where there were Azov and all sorts going on. And of course, once they were inside Sky, inside the Ukraine's military headquarters, they found this badge, of course, which is, of course, neo-Nazi, to say the least. Now, people were quick to point out and very sharp-eyed when they saw this from the BBC. The BBC have been making nice noises, saying that there's no such thing as neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Really? Could somebody please explain to me what that is circled behind there? And of course, people turn around and go, oh, it's photoshopped. It's not true. It is true. It was actually in the video. And of course, there is a major problem with that. Let's have a look at this.
Will lose faith and stop helping the Ukrainian people.
There you go.
The Ukrainian army. That is
what's behind him. There we are.
why we are doing this, to prove we're still strong.
This is how they explain the battle. The green plastic
and there once again is an Azov flag. The black
soldiers, Ukrainian troops still holding the north of the city. The brown ones, small Russian units trying to advance from the south. Ukraine is once again outnumbered, but it's proving costly for Russia. These are all their identity, basically.
Yes. So once they're doing that, they're then going in and on with the propaganda. But there is no doubt whatsoever that they are turning an absolute blind eye to the fact that these neo-Nazi lunatics are roaming around doing whatever they want, and they're allowing them to do that. And the reason they're allowing them to do that, of course, because they are killing Russians. And you heard Lindsey Graham say it straight out of your mouth, you know, very, very simply, that they were going around and they were doing these horrible, horrible things. And of course, this is not going to stop. It really isn't. It's going to keep going. Let's get into the second disaster. Now, the Ukrainians had a wonderful bit of success. They made a massive breakthrough in Kupiansk. Now, this is according to AMK mapping, and we've got an updated map for you in a minute. Now, 2,000 Russian soldiers died, but over 11,000 Ukrainian soldiers have so far been killed trying to take this area back. So, as you can see, the Oskol River, they came along the Oskol River. Once they made this dent, they flooded men into the Oskol River. And everybody was saying, oh, isn't it fantastic? But it was at a massive human cost, which everybody's avoiding like the plague. Well, this is Kupiansk updated in the last 2 hours. That is the only areas, the blue areas, that Ukraine are currently holding. And it has cost 11,000 men to do that. 11,000 men dead, not injured, dead. And we are to that time frame. So this morning, that map was accurate, and tonight this map is accurate. So in the space of 12 hours, they have lost this position. And of course, when they made the assault, they spent 3 days battering their way into those areas and being able to do that. And inside 12 hours, the Russians have put reinforcements in there. And this is now all of Kupiansk that Ukraine now hold. And of course, they did jump the gun by saying that they've done all these wonderful things. And of course, we've done it. It's fantastic. We've won. Don't worry about it. And nobody should panic because we are pushing the Russians back, which of course gives them their, shall we say, what you might call a Pyrrhic victory, I think would be the best one. Now, finally, somebody has turned around and said, and shown the fact that we have been correct all along about 2 million dead. Here is Jeffrey Sachs with Glenn Deason. They have both finally, as you can see from the title of their video, 2 million Ukrainians dead. Ukraine is stunned and a collapse is underway. We're going to play you that video now because Jeffrey Sachs is extremely knowledgeable on this subject.
So, given that this is the mindset, do you think the peace negotiations can actually go somewhere?
Well, we've been at this issue for decades, actually, not just years. So the point you're making is completely correct. It has been decades that the West, the U.S. and Europe, pushed for Ukraine to be part of the Western alliance. And that has meant NATO membership and European Union membership. And those two distinct clubs have become more and more intertwined over the past 30 years, during which this Ukraine project has been carried out. During this entire period, up until very recently, the United States and Europe were aligned that Ukraine would become part of NATO and that Ukraine would become part of the European Union. This was actually spelled out very clearly by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997 in his book, The Grand Chessboard, and also in his article, A Grand Strategy for Eurasia. And
This is my wife. Without makeup, she looks old and unattractive, but with makeup, she becomes stunning like Reba.
Conjoined the two, EU membership and NATO membership, said this is the westward enlargement, and Russia would have to accept it. Well, Russia did not accept it. Russia objected from basically 1991 onward. When this became a real project in the mid-1990s, Russia objected. Russia has objected ever since. And what has been also true is that Ukraine was internally divided over this issue all along. Ukraine itself is a mix of Ukrainian nationalist language ethnicity in the West and Russian ethnic populations in the South and the East, the Donbass. And there have been divides of politics and attitudes towards Western alignment along those lines, again, since Ukraine's independence back in 1990, 1991. So this issue has divided Ukraine internally, and it was the cause of war between NATO and Russia already going back now 30 years. What has changed recently is Trump's view, and this is a part of the U.S. security state view, because the U.S. itself is divided inside the security state, but the view that this was a gambit that didn't work. Brzezinski promised back in 1997 it would be costless and painless. Russia wouldn't have any ability to resist. The Biden team, which led the actual war since Russia's escalation in February 2022, thought that Russia would collapse quickly, either on the battlefield or economically or politically. What Trump has understood, and some of those around him, is that this 30-year gambit failed because Russia had said repeatedly this was of existential significance for Russia. This was a core national security issue, and Russia would not relent in preventing NATO enlargement. So this brings us till today. The realistic view of the Trump group right now is that a gambit that was supposed to be low cost, big win failed. It failed over the last basically 30 years, but specifically over the last 11 years, because the U.S. installed a pro-NATO regime in Ukraine in February 2014, and it was supposed to be a walk in the park after that, that NATO would just enlarge and Russia would back down. So the U.S. is now saying enough is enough. We have other things to do. We have other interests in the world. We're not in want of further escalation. Our stockpiles are pretty bare after all these years of war and the wars in the Middle East and the risks of war in East Asia. It's time to recognize that this was indeed existential for Russia. It was a wannabe for the West. It was a game, I would say, for the United States that was supposed to be an easy game. Didn't work. So the Trump group wants to end it, cut the losses. The European leaders say no. This war needs to continue. The Ukrainian regime, which is a U.S. installed regime, maybe even more understandably says, no, this war needs to continue. The regime depends completely on the war continuing. Zelensky has no prospect politically as soon as this war ends. It's been a money-making corruption machine in addition to all the other issues. The puzzle for many of us is why the Germans, the French, the British, and by that I don't mean the publics, I mean the small leadership group, are so insistent on fighting a losing battle, which has cost at least 2 million Ukrainian casualties. It's been a disaster.
So there we are, 2 million Ukrainian casualties. And of course, many people are turning around and saying, this is a war that couldn't be won, it can't be won, and they're going to kill everybody. Now, we're going to have a little look at this, but before we do, we're going to play you out for the first hour with this, then we'll hear from Nilis, then we're going to show you a video that will shock you to your core. If it doesn't, you're dead already.